Your fear of God speech, which makes you, jeez, no.
90s rugby in Ireland was hard going. You know, you could say, I wish I'd done A, B or C, or like there's loads of players in the world that would be very disappointed with that career. Like, you know, if you're a New Zealander, you'd be a total failure. Like, I won a fishing competition, like total potluck, putting a worm on a thing.
Will you still be coaching in 10 years?
Like, we'd say now the emotion is the icing on the cake, like, you know, whereas I think back then it was a lot of the cake, it's not the whole cake.
Okay. When is the last time you cried?
Jeez, I don't know.
Only Paul O'Connell would phone to say, listen, I'm only getting to the car park at 8:01.
Well, I was just looking at Google Maps. That's what that was saying.
You need no introduction, but a warm welcome all the same. It's good to have you on.
Cheers, thank you. Thanks.
You're our first ever guest.
Oh, I'm honoured.
Wouldn't go overboard, but it's great. It's great to have you. We were due, I should tell listeners, to meet at 8:00. Only Paul O'Connell would phone to say, listen, I'm only getting to the car park at 8:01.
Well, I was just looking at Google Maps. That's what that was saying. But I was thinking I mightn't get parking and then I might get stuck in the foyer. It might be 5 or 10 past. That's all I was saying.
It's good that you've mellowed. No, very considerate. No surprises. Obviously, when we're talking here on the eve of a camp and emerging Ireland, and when you're in camp, it's intense. Are you generally on the DOS otherwise? Like, is it Lahinch 4 times a week, or what's the general deal?
No, it's watching rugby is generally the job, you know. So Monday, Tuesday is, and maybe even into Wednesday is kind of watching the provinces from the weekend. And then you're probably, you know, once a quarter you're visiting the provinces and you're trying to then maybe catch up with other coaches from either rugby or another walk of life. And then generally I try and watch another few matches during the week of maybe one match or half a match or a match and a half of, you know, a good top 14 game and then on up to, you can watch all the lineouts really quickly from around the world. So the good teams that you like watching, you can watch their lineouts so the Opta database is incredible in terms of how you can get to what you really want to watch quickly, you know. So that's generally the working week. It's you know, and then every second week we're up in Dublin for meetings as coaches. We're in together. But yeah, that's a lot of people ask me that. They wonder, you know, is the job part-time? But that's not to say if you wanted to take a little bit of time to play some golf or do something, you can do that as well. Because when you're in camp, you're 7 days a week for 5 weeks in a row or whatever it is.
You work up your days in lieu.
Days in lieu, exactly, yeah.
Can I start off the beaten track? I just noticed something when I was reading about you this week that I'd never thought of as important or noticed. Paul Jeremiah O'Connell.
Yeah.
Big in the Hebrew Bible.
Yeah, that's my granddad's name from
right?
on my dad's side. Well, yeah, he was Jeremiah, but people called him Sonny. But I'm named, that's my second name now after him. So yeah.
I was checking him out. So Jeremiah is known as the weeping prophet because his heart was so tender.
Ah, there we go.
Which begged the question, you'll scoff, when is the last time you cried?
Jeez, I don't know. I would be quite emotional. Definitely around rugby. I don't know. I don't know. Like, when was the last time I cried? I don't know. It would have been rugby related anyway.
Right.
Perhaps for a big game or something. I don't know. I don't know when it was. I should know, but I don't know. It would be rugby related, though.
As a coach, even?
Yeah, a little bit. I think sometimes even when I've done interviews or stuff, when I, you know, if I was talking about Bernardo's or something with someone, I can get a bit emotional if I'm doing an interview. If I was talking to you on the street, chatting about it, I chat all day. But you know the way sometimes you can speak in front of a group of people, you get a bit emotional. I find that happens to me sometimes. And do you know, I grew up in a thing where, you know, my first captain would have been Mick Galway with Munster, and Axel would have been my captain after that. And, you know, they were like, you know, I always talk to Jerry Flannery about it. You know, I'd love to be back in the days when we used to be in the Clarion before a Munster match in January or whatever. And it was the last pool, you know, when it was, the pool stages were really good at the European Cup. It was 6 games, and playing an English team in January, you know, with it all on the line. And, you know, waiting in the hotel for Axel to come down and say a few words. And it would only be a few words, like, because he was a man of few words. But he's you know, he'd get emotional. His bottom lip would quiver. And, you know, he just, you'd understand how important it was and how important it was to him. And that made it that important to us because it was important to him. So I'm kind of from that school of maybe guys that sometimes they like to show how important it is by getting a little bit emotional, and I would say I do it less and less now. But you know, they were lovely times, and those were the captains. Woody would have been the same. Mick Galway, Axel, bottom lip quivering before you get on the bus to go to play a big game. You know, knowing you're the big game and probably a big night out afterwards if you won. It was just. It's the best of times, really.
I can see it in your face. You'd go back and live that day again if you could.
Yeah. They were great days, like, you know.
It's book season at the moment, so Johnny Sexton's is on the way, and I was obviously in advance of talking to you. I was thinking, what do I remember about Paul O'Connell's book? I didn't want to go back and look. I was like, what anecdote can I remember? Because you read a lot of them, and certain things blend, obviously, into other books. The thing I remembered, or the anecdote I remembered, is a really lovely one. Now, I may have it 80% right, but the gist is you're a young fella of a certain age, I don't know, 10, 11 kind of territory, and I know you're big into your swimming and your pitch and put, but you could be off going doing, like, I think it's like a fishing competition. You're doing something that you wouldn't ordinarily do, and it's your first time doing it. Let's say it's a fishing thing, and you win the competition, and you phone home to tell your mum, Sheila, like, geez, I won. But your dad's in the kitchen as well. And she sort of says, he's after winning. And you hear him say the most lovely thing a parent could say. He says, I knew he'd win. I told you he'd win.
Yeah.
And I always thought, God, whether he was trying to be a brilliant parent or not, he sort of knew how to do it.
Yeah. Well, he answered the phone. My dad answered the phone. Okay. And he said, and I told him I won the competition. So, like, you know, a fish jumped onto my hook.
It was fishing.
It was fishing, right. Yeah. So I won a fishing competition, like total potluck, putting a worm on a thing. But my dad did say that. When he answered it, he turned to my mother and said, I told you you'd win that fishing competition. And, like, you know, you might sound like, he might sound like a dad that put loads of pressure on me. He absolutely wasn't, you know, not in the slightest did he ever put any pressure on me. But he definitely, there was definitely a lot of belief in the house, you know, and I played loads of different sports. You know, I used to take up sport and give up a sport. You know, I played hurling, football. I was obviously a swimmer. I played golf. I used to, and eventually ended up back playing rugby. I played rugby under 10s and under 12s, and I'd given it up and I'd gone back then. So, like, you know, there wasn't a lot to believe in at times, you know. So, but he definitely, and all throughout my career then, it was the same. Do you know, it was nice that he never actually coached me. You know, there was other people could kind of, and I'm seeing it now with my own kids, you know, other people could, I suppose, give you maybe some harsh feedback or some tough talks from time to time. He never had to do that because he was never my coach. Yeah. But he was just always, and my mother the same, always supportive, massive belief. Like, you know, there was days there when I would have played really badly as a professional rugby player. I would have played really badly, and, you know, we were struggling with Munster and losing, but he always believed in me. You know, he'd say something like, you can't do it all by yourself, or something, you know, just something like that. It was just nice to have someone that was, you know, blind blindly 100% supportive. Because when you're on the high, even when you get to 16, 17, 18 and you get into academies and you're on the high performance journey and maybe your parents are really enjoying it and, they wanted to continue and they wanted to get better. I would say it's tempting sometimes when you're, because there was still a bit of a drinking culture. I probably drank a bit and, but even though I trained really hard, I'd say it's tempting once or twice to be a bit critical or to, but Jesus, they never, ever did it. Always supportive. Wow. It was incredible. I don't know how they managed to stick to that throughout my career.
That's so lovely. Yeah. I get the sense the parents of your generation had a great time. The odd time when even Shane Horgan and Ron McGarr were in studio together in Virgin and they'd be chatting, but there was a real familiarity in the way he'd be saying that. And how's Joan? And like, God, didn't our parents have a ball? I think like the drinking culture might have been the parents. I think they seemed to have a hell of a time.
I think it was new. It was new. And like, I was only thinking of this the other day about Irish rugby. I'm part of that group that grew up, I grew up in a rugby household, big rugby household. Even though I was playing other sports, rugby was the main sport. Rugby was the sport that Dad wanted us playing, really, right. And so I grew up in the 90s. Like 90s rugby in Ireland was hard going. The AIL was amazing if you're from Limerick. It was like these superstars. But the Irish rugby team was just so hard going. Whereas I think in the 80s we won a little bit and we had some great players. Same in the 70s and Mike Gibson and Willie John McBride and all these guys. But the 90s was real hard going. So I think 2000s the European Cup was just this new thing that was just exploding. So everything was a bonus, I think, for the parents. And then
it was so glamorous.
Yeah, it was so glamorous. Sky did such a great job in it, in fairness to them. And you had that Thursday night special on Sky and all the venues and and we were winning. And same with the Irish team, we were beginning to do good things as well. Things were turning. So I think maybe there was less pressure for the parents because we were winning a little bit, but there wasn't the pressure from previous Irish teams there or previous Munster teams or anything like that.
I think it was a sweet spot.
Yeah.
So your dad, and sorry, I'm leaving out your poor mother, who's just as amazing, I'm sure, but your dad, this great parent. As for Paul O'Connell, the parent, 3 kids between 7 and 14 now. If we sat them down and your better half and said, what kind of dad is Paul? What do you suspect the answer would be?
I don't know. Probably strict at times, a bit too strict at times, I would say.
You're the disciplinarian.
I'd say we're both the same, but
right.
Def probably could be more laid back than I am, But I'm around a lot. The job takes me away a good bit. So when you're away, you're away. So when you're on tour, you're gone. When you're Six Nations, I get home some Wednesday evenings and they'll get up to some of the games. But most of the time you're gone. World Cup you're gone for a long period. When you're gone, you're gone. But when you're home, you're home. Like you can bring them to school in the morning. You're not my day anyway doesn't start at 7 o'clock. I drop them to school and then I go home and I crack into it. And a few evenings I'll collect them from school and I'm able to go to the matches in the evening and I'm there for dinner and, I'm not out entertaining clients or anything like that.
Well, that sounds...
And the games at the weekends, if I'm going to a game, I can bring them to a game and things like that. So...
And is that terribly enjoyable? Is that kind of everything you hoped it would be?
Yeah, I enjoy going to matches. I enjoy the drive, I enjoy the drive to school and I enjoy that stuff. I enjoy the drive to Lahinch, or I enjoy cooking dinner or eating dinner together. I mean, we didn't go on a massive amount of holidays when we were young in my childhood, but I do remember it's been a great childhood for the normal stuff. The normal stuff was go crack.
Yeah.
And I hope my kids would say the normal stuff is go crack as well.
And I know, so you're a deep thinker about these things. Are you very consciously reading all the academic papers on the best approach to parenting and all these books? Or are you just instinctive. I'm just doing it.
I'm definitely trying to. Well, myself and my wife, like myself and my wife have listened to one book, an audio book that we listened to at the same time together, because our last fella, like a lot of parents, our last fella is a tricky customer at times, but I'd be trying to be laid back and trying to be aware and trying to let things pass and not trying to, I suppose, solve everything for them. And they're good kids. Like they're not. They don't need a whole lot of. They don't need a whole lot of discipline. They just need me to be nice and calm, I think, with them and show them the right way now and again.
Okay, well then a perfect time to play one of the two clips I was going to. So this is us, actually, and on Off the Ball a couple of years ago. Alan Quinlan's there as well, causing problems, and you'll hear Brian O'Driscoll as well. So have a listen.
I mean, you keep playing down the competitiveness. I don't play. But you're clearly a weirdo.
It's very much under control now. I will admit that it did go too far. I mean, we don't play. I remember we were playing Monopoly with my missus one time, and a few of the people that were living, we had people, when I was young, when I bought my house first, we had people living in the house. I used to love Monopoly. We used to play Monopoly, but I remember one day we nearly broke up. She started selling her properties off cheaply to other people to try and beat me in Monopoly.
You should clarify it's your wife now, Emily, in case she's listening, not your missus.
But, and we had a massive row. She was in tears. And,
for God's sake.
It was cynical, yeah.
So you've mellowed?
Yeah, I suppose I have. I was very, very. That was my biggest strength, as a rugby player. But growing up, it was my biggest strength was my competitiveness. Other people are, have lovely hands or lovely offloaders, or they see the space well and they're able to get it to the space, or they're good put. I was a competitor. That was my strength.
Yes. Because I was going to ask you on that point, there's a line you had or have, which actually has landed with a lot of players, and you hear players routinely quote it now. I don't know if you came up with it, but certainly you popularized it, where you said, as a player, world class, the aspiration was to be world class at things which require no talent. And that's kind of survived, I think, a bit beyond you initially saying it. So I'm curious, in coaching, what part takes no talent? And maybe I'm more interested, what is the talent in coaching? I understand what talent is on a pitch as a player. What's the talent in coaching?
I don't know what the talent in coaching is, but I think you can work hard at figuring out what you stand for, and you can work hard at putting language around what you stand for, and you can work hard then at, I suppose, giving the players constant opportunities to build habits around what you want the team to stand for, or them as players to stand for. So I think poor coaching that I would have experienced was vague, and good coaching was pretty clear. It was clear, and there was an understanding that this is actually going to be hard to learn. So we're going to keep doing it and keep giving you chances to get it wrong and then get it right again. We're not going to move on to something else all the time. Okay. So I don't know, is there any talent to coaching? But that's what I felt when I felt good coaching. That's what it felt like to me. And then what was the first question you asked me? You said, you said about the quote there. Yeah. In Zero Talent. But yeah, look, I don't know, is it the same in all sports? But in rugby, there's an awful lot of work rate moments. If you want to make a good tackle, and some guys were just amazing tacklers, they can get their foot in close, and their shoulder contact, and they can leg drive, and they can do all this stuff. But I suppose getting into the position to be able to do that and be able to even to see that play unfold, to put you into the position, actually takes no talent. You know, you've got to get off the ground quickly. You've got to look at what's going on in the game between your guys and their guys, and where the ball is and when it might appear. You know, you've got to scan those things. You've got to have a knowledge of how you want to defend or attack. If you've a good knowledge of that, it doesn't take a lot of work to get a good knowledge of that. It takes sitting down, watching game, and sitting down with your teammates and sitting down with coaches and things like that. So there's a load of things that take zero talent that can go into these big moments that look like they're, you know, high talent moments. So I think that was the point. I don't know where the quote came from. I don't know where we're using it in Munster, we're using it in Ireland a bit. It's something that I would say that, you know, Jerry Flannery and Donegal Callaghan and Peter Stringer and those type of David Wallace, those type of characters would believe in and buy into as well. And we may have been using it amongst each other, you know. Yeah.
And you get the credit.
I get the credit, yeah.
I presume as well, I mean, certainly one of the talents in coaching is that ability to not just have the knowledge and not just sit at the laptop 50 weeks of the year, to impart it. I mean, you're talking there about trying to get it across to them. I mean, that's a real art. Like, you'd be so curious afterwards, go, did you understand what I was saying to a player?
Yeah, I don't think it's an art. Like, there's a you can go to college and you can, you know, you
can study it, break it down.
Study, you know, you can study coaching, but you can study teaching. And there's a lot of people have a teaching degree.
And where do you feel you rank? Like, obviously, a lot of former teachers populate rugby coaching fraternities.
Yeah, I suppose Joe Schmidt's way would have struck a chord with me, because I was the player struggling to learn things, and all of a sudden I was actually learning them a little bit quicker now, because, you know, I think he was probably using proper teaching methods that he'd learned in college and that he'd used as a teacher in school. So
you were struggling to learn things.
Well, not to learn things, to do them under pressure. It's all well and good, you know. We you know, when you want to tackle, or you know, you want to have your footing close when you tackle, so you can do that in a load of different drills. But trying to do it then when you have to, you know, when there's a big game on, you know, we all, under pressure, we probably revert back to our bad habits. So you've got to try and make your bad habits your good habits, so that under pressure, that's what you can deliver. So, you know, I think I think he put a great emphasis on training and training almost like you play. Even though a lot of people say that and a lot of coaches say it, he was able to really deliver it, like, you know. Like, you know, he used to stand at passing drills we did and used to absolutely shout at us and bark at us. And some guys didn't like it, but I think they didn't realize that he was just trying to create the pressure you might feel in a match. He didn't, you know, he'd be laughing and joking 5 minutes later. Yeah, it wasn't because, you know, like, even I hear some people saying it now that they found it intimidating. He was creating the pressure scenario that maybe previously we had trained, you know, without that pressure, and then struggled to play under that pressure. Whereas he created that in training, which allowed you to deliver it in games.
Maybe there's a balance. You were there, I wasn't, but based on what the criticism would say, it's that it was too much intensity, that maybe it just was too prolonged.
I think definitely some people struggle with it, but I don't know that everyone fully understands some of it. Like, you know, I used to find it really enjoyable. Okay. And I wasn't good at a lot of the stuff that he wanted. Like, you know, there was guys that certain plays used to revolve around because they were good at the real hard skill. You know, I wouldn't be given that job. I'd be running dummy lines, or I'd be holding people down at the bottom of a ruck. But
you still liked it?
Yeah, it was proper coaching, you know.
Interesting. Let's talk Ireland then. 2021, you start with Ireland. Who calls you? Do you take any convincing? Do you jump at it? Is it basically after a quick phone call you're in, or what was your approach?
I had always gotten on well with Andy, and I'd spoken to him a few times, and I'd nearly taken a defence job somewhere, and I'd spoken to him about that, and I nearly did it, and he just rang me one day out of the blue and said, would I be interested in doing it? And in my head, I probably was thinking straight away that I was going to do it, but I told him that I needed a small bit of time and to think about it and chat to people about it. But
your agent would nod approvingly at that line.
No, well, but probably in my head, I was saying I'm definitely doing this, really, because he was a brilliant coach, like one of those guys. I didn't work for him for long. We were on the lines, and the lines coaching is a little bit different. It's hard to get everyone aligned on something. You probably are instilling the principles of what you believe in, but you don't have the time for all the subtleties, and the sub-principles are probably what really makes it work. But so I worked with him in a small period on the Lions, and I got on great with him and really enjoyed how he went about his business. So it was a brilliant opportunity to work with a team that I love, to work in international rugby, which I think if you have a family, certainly in the Northern Hemisphere, I think it's a bit easier. Like it's certainly in Ireland, you can get in your car on a Wednesday afternoon, you can go home, you can be back in camp Thursday morning or whatever, so you can get home a little bit. Whereas, it might be different in South Africa or New Zealand or whatever. But so it was a chance to work with some brilliant coaches. I was still very inexperienced, but Simon was going from the line out and the defence to defence on its own. So he was going to be able to keep an eye on what I was doing and check what I was doing. So I knew I was going to be able to get over the first few months where I felt a little bit out of my depth, or I'd have him to help me along.
Jeez, I didn't think you would feel out of your depth. I know the inexperience, but that's surprising to me.
Just the game moves quickly, and if you're out of it for a little bit, or if you're coaching somewhere else for a little bit, or whatever, I'd done stuff at the Munster Academy, then I'd done stuff with the Irish 20s, then I'd been in Stade Francais, but I'd been out for a little bit. Okay. The game moves quickly, and Irish rugby moves quickly as well, I think, so it was great. It was just a great opportunity to work with some really good people, and then to have another guy like Simon, as I was saying, a guy that had just done the job, was moving to a different job, but he'd still be there to check anything if I needed it. It couldn't have been a better opportunity for me. It
felt like you made an immediate impact. It jumped out to a lot of people that Ireland had become a touch sloppy at the breakdown, something which they were brilliant at under Schmidt, and then you arrived in. That seemed to improve. And everybody knew you were a real disciple of Joe Schmidt without wanting to go overboard on the wording of it. And it was interesting, even just last year, Johnny Sexton was asked about the difference you made. And he said, Paulie coming in was the final piece of the jigsaw. He married Joe's strengths with Andy's. He saw that we had lost some of the things Joe had given us, like detail at the ruck, discipline, habits and training. So ruck, habits and training, discipline, he felt you came in and just took some of that nice Joe Schmidt stuff and put it back on that team. I'd be very curious for your perspectives. That chime?
Yeah, a little bit. The ruck stuff, Ireland were playing a certain way where there was a lot of possession, so Ireland have more rucks than most other teams when they play a game. They have more rucks than most teams in the Six Nations. So the ruck was pretty important. And, sometimes you need to try something else to realise maybe what you were doing the last time wasn't too bad, because every system, no matter what system you use for anything, you'll always look at what the other guy is doing and you'd say, I'd love if we had that. But then he's actually looking at your one saying, I'd love if we had that, because nothing kills all the birds. There's always going to be a few what ifs. And I think they were still using a little bit of it, but drifted away from it as well. And we probably went back to a little bit more similar to what he was doing, with a few little tweaks. And we've evolved that over time. But the core of what he was doing was there. And it was just very clear. That was the thing about it, as I was saying earlier.
Yeah.
The ruck is mayhem. It's very hard to put logic on it. every picture, every scenario was different. You just don't know what's going to happen. Like you might be a half a meter away from hitting a ruck, and in the half meter from you arriving there, the whole thing could have shifted. Someone falls or someone twists or whatever. And so I think that the system that Ireland had under Joe was a pretty good catch-all system that worked for most of the scenarios, and we were able to plug that back in because a lot of the players knew it and understood it and were able to almost coach it and drive it themselves as well. So that helped, I think. It helped because, at the time, and maybe a bit less so now, but at the time we'd an awful lot of possession, a lot of rucks, so you needed to be good in that part of the game.
Yeah, and so you'd have a reputation for being big on detail. Someone like Mike Catt, a bit less prescriptive. Like, are there nice creative tensions? I kind of half heard a whisper at the start.
Yeah. It was great. It was great because, I think it's great to learn different ways of doing it and try and marry the two or the three or the four of them together. I think we've great balance in the coaching group because, my way of doing it only would probably drive people mad. I would say, Mike Catt's way of doing it only would probably drive people mad. Andy's way of doing it only would probably drive, but if you have a group of people that get on well together and want to figure it out together and trash things out over conversations so that you can present something pretty united to the players, you're in a good place.
You guys are allowed to row behind the scenes, but then when it's presented to the players, united front.
We didn't really row, but we'd always discuss things, and we'd always, try and be as clear as we could. We probably weren't always as clear as we could have been, but you're trying to be clear to the players because, it isn't, you can't do a lot of exploration in international rugby.
Yeah,
we get 12, we come together and we've 12 days before we have to be a team, and they've been all in their provinces. So you have to be pretty clear in how you're going to do things. And so at the same time, then you want to stick with what you believe in, but you have to understand that the guy over there has another way of looking at it as well. But he's a great guy, and you have to, you have to figure it out. And we were good at doing that. Andy was good at refereeing that. I'd say.
I'll bet he was. Yeah. This is a perception point. You may have stats up your back pocket here which prove this wrong, but I'll give you the perception point anyway on the line out. Is that I would say, so 21 to 24 included. The biggest dip in the line-out came at the time you would have least wanted it at the World Cup. I think it was 82%, which is kind of outside the top 10 at the World Cup, which I'd say was beyond frustrating, infuriating, and all the rest. That was really interesting in that if almost anyone else was in there, it would have been like big criticism for the person looking after the line-out. There was almost a degree with you of, well, geez, if he can't sort it out, like, what hope do we have? So let him at it. Why did it strike at the worst possible time? And am I right in saying that was the dip?
Yeah, well, I think, I'd say the three best defensive lineouts in the world would be ourselves, South Africa and New Zealand. You saw in the South Africa-New Zealand World Cup final, either of them could barely win a lineout off each other. South Africa gambled on a few things against us and caught us in that South Africa game. And it was brilliant, actually, what the players did. Like, we lost the first four in a row. I mean, as the line-out caller, I had a few days like that. It is really tough. But in fairness to the line-out callers and to Ronan Keller, they got things back on track. And we finished the game strongly. I think we won. I think they might have stolen one other line out after that, and we might have thrown one crooked. But it was excellent how they got, and we won the game. And then against New Zealand, I think we lost three in that game, and one of them, off the last line out, we high tackled. Off that high tackle, they kicked to the corner and they scored a try. So you can say the line out cost us a try. We scored a maul try in that game. We scored another try off a maul in that game. So, sometimes it's hard to grade where your line out is good or bad. Like, you could lose 3 line outs in a game, but you could score 2 maul tries in a game.
Okay.
And you could say, well, you operated at 70%, but they actually scored 2 tries and they didn't concede a try off a maul. So it's hard to exactly grade, but in that game, that New Zealand game, we weren't helped in getting off to a poor start by our line out with some good field position. We got the ball back, but we probably didn't get to run the plays that we wanted to run off the line out. And generally, Catty, the plays he had, we generally got something out of them when we won good ball.
And so is that in the coaching boxes, the 2 boys turn to their left and say...
No, never. You'd nearly rather they did.
Because I thought
they'd never do that.
This might be 2 and... I think this is 2 and 2 equaling 5, but on TV, it looked at halftime like Andy Farrell sort of said something to you a little gruffly, and people thought, oh, he's barking at him there over the line out.
Someone said that to me. No, definitely not. I'd say he would have been. No, I can't remember what that was, but it wouldn't have been.
Sort yourself out there.
Yeah, it wouldn't have been that.
Okay.
He'd never. He might have been thinking that, but he'd never say it.
Okay, I have never heard players so effusive about a coach as Andy Farrell. Like it's like a cult, actually, the way they go on about him. So what has struck you about him as a coach? What has he done here that has seemed to just have the secret sauce?
I'd say he's very conscious of the pressure part of things that would have come out of maybe some of the reviews from the World Cup, and worked hard at, having very high standards and trying to get the guys to play and perform at a very high standard, and not let them have anything but the highest of standards, but at the same time not to let that pursuit of high standards affect their enjoyment of the game, or affect their ability to perform under pressure on the big occasion. I think, so it's a hard one to do, probably, to have high standards of people, but also, want them going into a game relaxed and ready to enjoy it and not afraid of making mistakes. So I think he does that really well.
The word I keep hearing is vulnerability. This is what everyone's saying about a Farrell camp. It's very different, maybe, to that more macho environment of 20 years ago. It does seem, maybe that's a wrong perception.
Yeah, I think it's the big buzzword now, vulnerability, isn't it? But I suppose as a coach, you want to know if people are struggling or don't understand something, or are feeling nervous to the point where it might affect their ability to perform. And maybe I think I think in every camp back in the day it was a bit macho, and you had to pretend that you weren't nervous, or you pretend that you knew everything, or pretend that you were ready to go out and do what was required. Whereas I suppose trying to take pressure off players by understanding that side of it has become a big part of what Andy does and Gary Keegan does as well.
Because I was struck by Calvin Nash playing Six Nations first time this year, and after French match, I think he came out, and it's like lots of his post-match interviews were, God, I was so nervous all week. I felt awful. I was talking to Andy about it. I felt rotten. I felt terrible. I was so nervous. There was no sense of like, if I tell the coach I'm like really panic stations here, I might not play at the weekend.
Yeah.
That struck me as, wow, that's progressive.
Yeah. And listen, I think it's a very good thing, and I wish I had it as a player, and I think it was probably the next progression in coaching anyway. I think Andy does it particularly well, maybe because he was probably part of that era where it was quite macho, same as it was for us.
Well, he would have been told to man up, and what are you talking about?
Yeah. And there's a bit of that needed from time to time as well. Sure. But I'd say most of the time for our guys, it's just they work incredibly hard. They're very smart rugby players. They're really well coached in their provinces. They're we've a very good team. Trying to help them stay out of their own way is a big part of the job, and I think he coaches that really well. you know, and I don't know, you know, a lot of coaches can coach scrums and lineouts and mauls and rucks, and you can go and learn it pretty easily, I would say, and teach it. Trying to take pressure off players while also trying to perform at a high level. There's a real skill set in that, and I think he's good at that.
Your fear of God speech, which makes you, jeez, no. So you'll say, well, look, those days are gone. Should they be totally gone either? Like, that's amazing in many respects. You went out and played so well. Andy Farrell always talks about that match. I know in part because he played in it, sure, but he holds that up as like, wow, that's an ultimate level of primed physicality performance. I don't know if that should be gone totally either.
I don't think it's totally gone.
Right.
I think that and it was less, maybe not as much. Eddie O'Sullivan would be very insulted, but I think just that used to be such a big part of it. That, you know, the emotion, we'd say now the emotion is the icing on the cake, like, you know, whereas I think back then it was a lot of the cake, it's not the whole cake.
Okay.
And
But say New Zealand in a quarter final, is there icing on the cake that day? Is the dressing room as pumped physically and talking in the same way?
Yeah, if the characters that are a bit like that are there,
Are they still there?
There's always a few of them. Yeah,
Who
There's
drives it
probably less of them.
Who drives it these days in that dressing room? Who would set that tone if it was that kind of a day?
He to be a little bit like that, you know.
Yeah. He's in the wrong generation, isn't he? He wishes he was back with Anthony Foley. That's where he wants to be.
But no, it's still there's plenty of them. You know, it's just less of it. It's just less of it, and you know, wanting it. You know, whoever says, you know, the team that wanted it more won. You know, has anyone ever wanted it more and lost? Like, you know, it's not about that anymore. For our players, anyway, they prepare really well. So it's trying to get that preparation out onto the pitch. I think very often we might have prepared well and lost some of the preparation in the emotion before the game. And I think our boys have gotten very good at bringing not just the work they've done in the week previous or the weeks previous, the kind of body of work they've done over their careers. They're good at getting all of that out onto the field. Okay.
So if somebody went into fear of God mode now, would some of them be looking at each other going, Jesus, what's your man doing?
Yeah. I would say so, yeah. I would say, listen, there's like, you know, Johnny be the coolest customer on the pitch back in the day, but he was quite old school in the dressing room before the game. And I think sometimes for younger players, it's nice to see how much it means to guys or how important it is or how emotional they can get playing for their country or playing for their province or whatever it is. It's nice to see it sometimes.
Yeah. So you're watching a ton of rugby and obviously you're at the coalface as well. You said the game changes a whole bunch. Are there trends in the game last year, 2-3 years that you think are really interesting?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at Super Rugby this year, Auckland won playing, you know, very different rugby to any New Zealand team. They were almost playing like a French team would play, you know, a French top 14 team would play.
What, big pack?
Yeah, big pack and very tight to the ruck and unstructured and you know, it looked like there was no logic to it at times, but I would say there's an awful lot of logic to it. Same as maybe Toulouse or Bordeaux can look at times, and I presume that's from Vern Cotter coming from France. You know, a Kiwi living in France, going, you know, this is actually a great way for Kiwis to play. So some of the tries they scored during the Super Rugby competition, you know, you couldn't copy them. You couldn't say we're going to copy this style of play because it just looks so unstructured. Right. So I would say a lot of teams are going to be moving towards that style of play now in the future.
At test level as well?
I would say so, yeah. Yeah, France do a bit of it. They play really structured rugby in their own half. They, you know, they're almost like South Africa in their own half. But when they get into the opposition half and it's it's any bit quick at all. They're just playing whatever the hell they want to do, like, you know, and it's hard to defend.
I bet it is. Where are Ireland on that whole spectrum at the moment?
I would say we're a bit of both, but you know, sometimes we can be very structured, you know, and it's not that our guys are good at doing that, like, you know. So and I would say, like every team, we want to be a bit more unpredictable, maybe.
Okay, because listening to a couple of the players, the sense is some of the messaging from the coaches is we'll set up the play to a certain point, and then you just have to take the right option, and it's taking the right option, and that's the secret sauce. Is that how you see it?
Yeah. I think just trying to be able to see the space and get it to the space quickly, you know, and having a way of that the team is set up that you can get it there quickly. You know, if you don't know where everyone's going to be when you see the space, well, then you're going to need a 2-minute conversation before you can get it there. Whereas if you have a pretty good idea where everyone is going to be, you can get it there quick enough.
It's funny. Johnny Sexton recently said that I'm 99% sure it's Joe Schmidt who just planted this line in his head. And he said, like, people that, you know, talk about Sexton's IQ and I'm sure it's off the charts, but he says, Schmidt just said to him, just attack the space. Wherever the space is, just go after that. And he's like there at 38 going, God, in some respects, when you don't have much time to think, it's that simple for me. Where's the space? I go after it. And that's you know, a good chunk of how he's going about his business.
It helps if the rest of the team are looking for the same thing, and are aligned with how to get it there, you know, because, you know, you can take it and you can kick it across there. That's probably the simplest way of doing it. But if you want to pass it there, you need to have people there to pass it to so that they can get it there as well. And so being aligned is really important.
Yes.
And that's why you need a little bit of structure, like, you know.
Yeah. And are you enjoying watching rugby? I mean, if you were a fan, would you like what you're seeing out there now? Do you think the game's in a good place in that respect?
Incredible. Like, I thought the rugby at the weekend was amazing. Like, Munster Connacht game was brilliant.
I've seen very high scores in rugby at the moment.
Yeah, very high scores. Super Rugby was incredible. Or not Super Rugby, the Tri Nations was incredible. Super Rugby was actually really interesting to watch. The French rugby is brilliant to watch.
Will we go back to routine scorelines ever again of 12-9 and 15-12? Are those days kind of gone?
I don't know.
I know the odd test match obviously is that way.
I think things happen, you know, like the defence gets on top for a while, and then the attack figures it out and gets on top for a while. But I don't know. I can't see it. I think teams are getting better and better at finding space now on the pitch. So who knows?
What's your role next year when Andy Farrell goes? Head coach. No, I'm joking.
No. I would say it's the same role, assistant coach, and you know, and supporting Simon. But you know, even we did the emerging tour, almost a trial run of it 2 years ago, and we have it again. It's still a bit different because you know, you can't do it the exact same way Andy would do it. So I'm sure it'll be a bit different, but you know, we've a pretty good idea of what works for us and why it works for us.
Okay. And
I'm sure it'll evolve a little bit from what we do, but not massively.
Yeah. He won't be smuggled in clothes baskets, Jose Mourinho style, somewhere in 25 if things aren't going well, will he?
I doubt it. No, I doubt it. No, it'll be good. It'll be good for us as coaches. It'll be good for the players as well, you know, to because it will be different, and when he comes back, then it'll be more different again, because he'll have garnered a whole host of experiences with the Lions. So I think in terms of stimulating everyone, it'll be a great experience as we head to the next.
Yeah, are you itching to go on the Lions with him as part of the coaching staff?
I don't know. I don't know. I'm
no comment.
Yeah. I don't know if I'd be. I think there's certain coaches would go on that and they'd be really confident doing it. They're probably maybe doing it a little bit longer than I would be, I think it would be a tough. I think it'd be a tough tour. You know,
Sure.
you've 2 games a week. You've different countries coming together. Like the Lions coaching is, and you know, Warren Gatlin and Sean Edwards, they did such a great job of it with Ian McGeechan in 2009. You know, they simplified the game so much that, you know, 2-3 training sessions in, we knew exactly what we stood for. But, you know, you need to be coaching a long time to be able to simplify things. You know, there's a real skill set in simplifying the game, and I thought they did a great job on it. So I don't know if I'd be there yet.
Yeah, that's interesting. Like, even I don't know if I'd be there yet. Not sure I have the confidence for that. Just yet.
Listen, it's
is this false
humility?
It's
not easy. No, the Lions coaching is not easy because, you know, the players are in their clubs. They've a way they believe in. They're in their countries. They've a way they believe in. You know, they meet you for 2 or 3 weeks, and they mightn't get selected in some of them, and you know they start chirping, and it's a real. You really have to know what you stand for and how you're going to go about it. Like Graham Rowntree came in 2009. It was brilliant because in 2005, we came up with the calls. We tried to please everyone. In 2009, Graham Rowntree just came in. We're using the England calls. This is what they are. And I was like, well, you know, I think this is actually a simpler system here. And he was like, no, this is what we're using. And it was brilliant because he knew it inside out. He knew he had 4 or 5 guys in there. Well, he had a lot of English players in there, but he knew he had 4 or 5 guys in there who were great guys who would actually explain it really well to everyone else.
Yes, okay.
So we'd all actually be very comfortable with it very quickly. So, you know, there's a real strength of mind and a real experience and maybe age to do that.
You have actually been on those tours, seen how it was done well in 2009. Do you know, in a way?
I don't know, I just see myself as a lot younger than Graham Rowntree was in 2009, but maybe I'm wrong.
Okay. So one last one on just the game more broadly. Like, I guess there are concerns as well, bigger picture, and there are any number of issues facing any sport. With rugby, people would point to financial viability, to getting the calendar right, things like concussion. People obviously want a clean sport. There are all of these challenges. You'd be a big voice in the sport, very respected. What concerns do you have over the game, or what kind of health do you feel it's in those more broad terms? I appreciate that's a big question.
But space would be my biggest concern in the game. Like, you know,
Space.
How do we create more space?
Okay.
And you know, that's the challenge. Because when we played, you know, even 20 years ago or 30 years ago, there was 8 people or 9 people in the ruck. There was so much space on the field.
Okay.
Whereas there's less and less space on the field now.
And yet
that leads to 2-man tackles, and that's where the collisions come in, and that's where the injuries come in. And I think, you know, how can we have more one-on-one tackles in the game? And that's when you have to tackle low, and that's when you have more offloads. And
interesting. See, that's, again, what you've done there is what a Lions coach does. You've taken a whole bunch of problems and you've gone back to root cause. And, you know, because these are hard things to solve. People would talk about concussion and the physicality of the game, say, where do you even start? Most people wouldn't start with space. They're very focused on the tackle, but space might be a more interesting place to start. You know? You last played a rugby match in 2015. So that's coming up on 10 years. I don't know if it feels like 10 years or not. I listened back this week to an interview you gave in 2020. You were talking to Marie Crowe and Donncha Callahan. COVID quickly, you know, put all that to bed. Everything you were talking about, it was right on the eve of it. But you said a very interesting thing about missing sport. You said first couple of years, actually, I felt, geez, I'm out the gap here. I'm okay. I'm not missing it terribly. But the last year, 18 months, God, I do miss it. I really miss it. So that was 2020. Where are you now, that retired sportsman?
Yeah, well, I love what I do, but I do miss playing. Like, I mean, even I was watching the build up to Wasps Bath, Northampton the other night. They played, I think it was Friday night, they played the first game of but they were doing a good build up. They were talking to the Northampton guys about, having won it and what it felt, and they were chatting to supporters, and it was real good build up, and, but it was, I think it was Walder or one of the guys that was retired, and he was saying that he misses waking up in the morning after a game and being sore. And it just hit me, I would have the same thing, I would have, that was great waking up the morning after a game and you'd won and you're sore, but you feel great that you feel great that your body is sore because of what you did to win or whatever. So, I miss it. I just really, I struggled to enjoy it, but I did love it. I loved the training. I loved the matches. I loved the meetings. I loved the arguments. I loved, trying to get better or whatever it was. There was very little of it I didn't love. I loved the guys I played with, the teams I played on. Very little of it I didn't love, and so it's hard not to miss it when that's the case. I was never at the stage where, I've moved club here for the fourth time, and I'm gonna hang in here now for 2 more years because I've this job lined up. I was always loving what I was doing, and when that's the case, it's hard not to miss it,
Yeah. And is it strange in that respect, still being so close to it? Aviva Stadium, crowd filling up, the warm up. God, I can smell it. I can touch it. I don't know.
No, I would say being involved with the team in this period has been unbelievably enjoyable.
Okay.
It's been so successful, and the players are just an incredible, every coach says it, I'm sure, about the players they coach, but they're a great bunch. They, we put pressure on them to do certain things to be better, and they never shirk it. So being involved and being inside it with a great group of people has been really enjoyable. Now, I heard someone else retired saying no, they've no interest because they know they're finished and their body isn't capable. I'm a little bit like that as well. I know my time has come and I had a great time of it. So I know I can't go back playing. I'm not like one of those guys that retired early and thought, geez, I could have done it for. That didn't happen to me. So, but. I'm not like that at the game when we're warming up. I'm not saying I wish I was back there. I'm not saying that, but I do miss it because I enjoyed it so much, or I loved it so much.
Yeah. Are you content with your playing career? European Cup winner twice, for anyone whose memory needs jogging. For the purpose of this conversation, URC 3 times, Six Nations winner 3 times, Grand Slam in 09, Triple Crown 4 times, which was much bigger at the time. It's worth stating. Yeah. And then the 3 Lions tours, as we mentioned, one as captain and the winning series in 13. Now that the dust has so firmly settled on it all, are you happy, content?
No, you can't change it. So there's no. It's and I've probably answered this question differently before, but you can't change it. So what's the point of not being happy with it? So
you've chosen to be content with it.
Yeah. There's no. You can't.
Sorry, this wasn't a leading question, but I'm not suggesting you should not be content with that. By the way,
no, but I know what you're saying. You could say, you could say, I wish I'd done A, B, or C, and there's loads of players in the world that would be very disappointed with that career. If you're a New Zealander, you'd be a total failure. But it is. Yeah. There's no.
But part of that career though is also this is why even the World Cup quarter-final defeat and they're a failure is kind of unfair. What those stats don't really capture is even what we're talking about with your parents coming through. this was the start of the Heineken Cup. This was Irish rugby from the
Yeah,
90s.
so-
This was building something. So yeah, a New Zealander might think, well, that's not up to much. But actually, there's a hell of a kind of journey in there as
Yeah.
well. It's more complicated than just what you won.
Yeah, and there was a lovely article before the Olympics Paul O'Donovan did in the Sunday Times. I don't know, did you see it? Where he's such a brilliant speaker, but he was saying, being asked, will the year be will it be a failure if he doesn't win a gold medal? And the question was just so wrong to him that, like, all he said was that he feels that he's living a life worth living. So he trains really hard. He obviously has to study and all that in between it, and he has his ups and his downs. But even if he didn't win, he felt that he's living a life worth living. Like, he's enjoying his life. Like, so that's what I would have felt now when I look back at my career. Whatever I won or lost, I always felt that I wouldn't rather be doing anything else. I never felt I was making a sacrifice. I probably missed a few weddings and a few stag do's. They were the only sacrifice I make. Everything else, I was loving doing it. So I think that was a great article, that Paul O'Donovan thing, because when I read it, I said, sometimes you read something and someone has articulated exactly what you'd love to have said,
And would it apply to the World Cup quarter-final defeat? Is that, or is that?
Sure, that's all part of it, isn't it? Unfortunately.
Yeah. No, it sure is.
If you could change one thing, you'd change a load of things, So
Has the World Cup taken on this outsized importance in the way we're talking about rugby? Because it feels, for me, it started when Eddie Jones started like resting players and messing around during the Six Nations with England, and like every time they lost, it's all about 2 years, nothing else matters. And I thought, look, obviously the World Cup quarterfinal is a big deal, but you want to be sort of careful as well if that's how you view it.
It'll be a big deal until we win one, and then when we win one, it'll be less of a big deal.
Yeah.
So hopefully it happens sooner rather than later.
Yeah, there's only 2-3 years to go. Only 2-3 more years of that question being asked.
Yeah.
But like you don't want to get to a point where Ireland are winning the Six Nations and we're thinking, well, look, what does that mean for the World Cup in 3 years' time? That's not a great, back to Paul O'Donovan's point, that's not a great way for us to view Irish rugby at all times either. But I think
we don't view it that way, to be honest with
you.
And I don't feel that, I never feel that from anyone in the IRFU, above the senior coaches, or I never feel it within the coaching staff.
Yeah.
Other people may feel it because they've been conditioned to feel it because of those things that you said, but we don't. I certainly don't feel it.
So you got a lot out of the Six Nations this year, for instance.
Yeah. Got a lot out of Six Nations. Got a lot out of this summer. Got a lot out of New Zealand, winning a Test series in New Zealand. It was incredible. Like, when we look back at Willie John McBride, and I remember after the Lions tour in 2005, thinking of Willie John McBride winning in 1971, thinking, that is just the most unbelievable achievement of all time. Like, I would have had it above a World Cup or anything like that, winning a Lions Test series. And for our boys to go down and do it 2 years ago was just incredible.
The win in South Africa was also really extraordinary. That game took on just this heightened sense of, it's not for a World Cup, it's just for who's going to win today, but felt massive because of it. And then to win in the way that Ireland did, I mean...
Yeah, so one of the brilliant things about rugby is a test match, and some people might laugh at it, but maybe you need to be a rugby person to understand how big a one-off rugby match is.
And I think that's great. I would have hated if he'd taken a weakened team to South Africa, or if it's like, well, it's not the World Cup. Rugby doesn't want to lose these, really intense occasions.
And the players want to create history, and that was a. They'd already won a test match in South Africa, but we hadn't won a test series in South Africa. It was a chance to create history. We didn't manage to do it, but we still did something pretty special and pretty important. Yeah.
So when that drop goal goes over, do you still get a hell of a rush? And that's
we were bonkers, and it's never happened to me. I've always seen coaches in the box, that go mad. It's never happened to us. We've all been whatever way it's happened, we've all been delighted but pretty calm at the end of games, and that's I've never had that as a coach. I nearly fainted. We were celebrating so much, so I actually had to sit down. So it was a brilliant experience.
Why do you think that one in particular got you?
Listen, it's South Africa are double World Cup winners. We obviously have a healthy enough rivalry with them. You know, Razzie is an interesting character. He obviously coached Munster, and you know, there was plenty said in the build up to the game, and you know, and they're hard to beat down there. They're an excellent side. They're very physical, but they're very smart as well, South Africa, and how they go about playing the game. So for our lads to, I suppose, almost win the game, have the game pretty close to being in the bag in the first half, to have lost it then in the second half, and then to have come back and won it in the last 5 or 10 minutes. It was a brilliant experience.
Yeah, I can imagine. Just the last one. This is slightly random, but I've never actually asked you about this before. You spoke to the European Ryder Cup team in 2016.
Yeah.
At Hazeltine on the Tuesday.
Yeah.
Now, they went on to have a record defeat. Their worst since Walton Heat in 81. So, you know. But I'm just picturing Henrik Stenson, Sergio Garcia, Rafa Cabrera Bello, Martin Keimer and Thomas Peters looking at you and thinking,
yeah,
who is your man? What do you say to them, or when you speak to teams like that? Do you have a go-to core?
No.
message?
That day I didn't speak for long. I was just one of the things that I spoke about was one of Joe's things was about winning the next moment.
Okay.
And you know, I suppose you had to tell a few stories, rugby stories around that to bring it to life, because that's what they're living in that competition, and probably in golf all the time. So that was one of the things I spoke about. And there was a few other bits and pieces, but they were very nice. They were very eager to engage and chat, and I stayed around for the evening. They were, that comedian from Bradford, or not the comedian, the magician from Bradford was there. I can't remember his name. Right. Unbelievable magician, and they had a beautiful team room, and it was lovely to see actually, because the team room was pretty much like a rugby team room, you know, but they were really excited to bring me in to see it, because they thought that nothing like this had ever been put together before. Yeah. But for them, they don't ever have that. So so it's lovely to see actually how much they enjoyed being part of a team and having someone to rely on, and because I'd say it's pretty lonely, and I think that's what they seem to enjoy about the Ryder Cup. But yeah, the speech didn't work anyway.
Do you do much of that stuff? Would you be speaking to teams regularly?
Not really. No, not really. No. I think it's very. I'd like to speak to teams at the start of the year, maybe, and not the night before they play a game, because
what can you say? Yeah,
you're just relying on emotion then, or something, and maybe you can get something to click. But you know, I think most of our guys on the Friday night before the game now, the work is done. You know, they don't need a speech, our guys, like, you know.
And what if you speak to a team at the start of the year, do you have a go-to core thing that you tend to come back to?
Not really, no. I'd probably, you know, speak a lot about the, you know, the things that we speak about with Ireland. That, you know, one of the things I would have taken from Joe is that, you know, under pressure we are our habits. So it's a question of what habits are you going to build now between now and the big thing that you're preparing for. And it's a nice way of looking at your training and your preparation, you know. So you know, that's one of the main things we talk about with the players.
Yeah. Last question then. I didn't really ask you much about the Emerging Ireland Tour, because by the time people hear this, they'll have seen you in the media talking about it, and you'll have probably answered all the questions that need to be answered. In broad terms, the importance of this, or what you're looking to get out of it, is it, I mean, will you be watching what guys are like over in the corner playing cards and personalities and all of that kind of stuff as every bit as much as rugby, or What's your outlook on it as you head?
Yeah, we're just hoping to get players familiar with how we do things. It's probably it's not too dissimilar to what they do in their provinces, but sometimes if you hear something differently from someone, if you hear the same thing differently from someone else, it can kind of connect with you and kick on a bit. And for a lot of them, some of them have been in 20s environments pretty recently. Some of them haven't been in an Irish environment in a little while. So it's nice for them to, I suppose, get out of their province and get on something different for 2 weeks and actually go and chat to the Irish coach, and for them to maybe say, we think you can do it. You have, if you do ABC, we see you as being up here. So we got great value out of it as coaches. The last time we were able to trial some things, we were able to, I suppose, work with a little less pressure in terms of results, and some players came out of it really well. So there's a lot of things can come of it. It's not just about trying to get players through. It's a great opportunity for us to coach. It's a big gap between the summer tour and the autumn internationals, generally speaking. The gap between the autumn internationals and Six Nations isn't too bad, and Six Nations and the summer tour isn't too bad, but it's a big gap. So it gets us back up and running with our coaching. It allows us try some things, and obviously gets us connecting with the kind of the next level of players underneath the senior squad, and the next level of players that have a chance of coming through. And sometimes just players need to hear, this is it's as simple as this. Do A, B, and C, and you'll be up here. So
will you still be coaching in 10 years? Do you think?
I don't know. I don't know. I honestly don't know. I think about that a lot and figure out what the next step might be. But I don't know. We'll see.
You don't make 5-10 year plans, that kind of stuff?
No, certainly not at the moment anyway.
Okay. Well, it's great to see you're enjoying it, and thank you so much for sitting down and doing this. I know you've been great with your time, and you've moved a few things around to do it for us, so we appreciate it. And Paul O'Connell, all the best. Thank you.
Cheers. Thanks, Joe.